Welcome to Savage Simplicity Storytellers, where I talk with smart women who are doing smart things to build lives that work for them. I'm your host, Bernadette Hill, and today's story is about career reinvention in the tech industry. My guest today is Kim Stevens, Senior Technical Project Manager for one of the nation's top universities. Kim is one of the nearly 40% of women who have an unconventional entry into tech. Join us as Kim talks about her unconventional journey and the mentorship women in tech deserve.
Kim, before we get started on your journey, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the statistics that I was surprised to read. I wasn't surprised to read that as of 2024, women make up only about 28% of the tech industry. It might have gotten closer to 35%, but we're still pretty much in that 30% range. And just 16% of engineering roles and only 21% of tech executives are women still. I was surprised to read this statistic. Over 50% of women in tech leave the industry by age 35. That is pretty surprising.
I'm not that surprised by that, especially if they're talking about corporate startup tech world, because that is such a fast-paced, high demand. It's not sustainable when you also have to have a life.
Mm-hmm.
So, the people that can do it are people that don't have to take care of homes and take care of children and take care of things, right? So it's not, you do have to make a choice, right? If, to stay in there means that you don't have certain things.
Yeah. One of the through lines, as I talk to other women who have advanced their careers, it's the same. We're always prioritizing and we're always juggling. We're always trying to balance because,
Yes.
So that's not a surprise to you. That was definitely a surprise to me. We're going to start with your journey now. So you grew up in Yolo County. Can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing and in particular, how did that environment shape the way you work and lead today?
So I was born in Yolo County and kind of raised around different areas. My parents divorced by the time I was 5 and both remarried. And so I moved with my mom and stepdad and my sister. So we grew up kind of around, but a very traditional Gen X upbringing, I would say, right? Divorced parents, working parents, latchkey kids, figuring out.
Sounds familiar.
Yes. Figuring out the ins and outs of custody, visits and not seeing family for some time, going back and forth, getting step families and not just myself, but in our environments, right? So, I always say you're either related by marriage or divorce. We have so many, people in our spaces that are, oh, that's my cousin's ex-stepfather's daughters, whatever. I think so much of our life, we are resilient because we've had to overcome and figure out how to interact with so many different types of people, so many environments, different generations, different beliefs, right? And I think for our generation, that was a new kind of thing. We were kind of paving the way to figuring out how to do that. But it was just our life, right? We were, as these things were coming up, we were coping with them.
Yeah, you mentioned the word resilience and that traditional upbringing. I had that same sort of upbringing, very independent, right? We're very independent individuals, and now we're in the workforce and doing our thing. Now, you studied political science, actually, and because you grew up where you grew up, that was your first passion. Can you talk a little bit about what got you into political science and where you studied?
Yeah. So, I'll say I didn't have the traditional high school to college to work kind of path. I went to community college first because I was a little directionless. I worked full time. I was a bank teller and a bookkeeper and a pharmacy technician, then an office manager, and finally an assistant analyst in city government. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I know what I liked. I liked history and I liked politics and I liked that kind of thing. Trying to figure out how to make that a career path. So when I finally graduated from UC Davis at 25, I was like, okay, I'll become an analyst for Yolo County because that, kind of fits. And then I went out on a limb and I took a job in political affairs for a statewide organization, which I thought was exactly what I was destined to do.
Mm.
And it turns out I didn't really like it. I didn't like asking people to spend money on a idea, a policy that was more important than something else, and trying to convince people that it was the most important thing in their world. So I didn't last long there because I realized it wasn't politics I liked. It was actually functioning government, kind of the old tried and true. So it took until I had my first child to kind of come back to UC Davis as an employer, and then try to find an avenue that fit. And even there, it took a while to find the right path, which I eventually did.
Yeah. Now, asking a question about that pathway, how did you find the right path? What was your entry point and then your career journey?
Okay, so because I had various experiences. I actually came into UC Davis as a temp employee.
Oh, wow.
Because I had actually, my son was only 3 months old. I was looking to get in, and somebody had said that's actually when you don't really have an industry specific area, sometimes the temp pool is a great place. And so it did, and I ended up working as a program manager for a researcher, and realized that they had a very high demand. They needed like almost 24/7 support. They needed very much, and I had a 3-month old and a home, and so and it paid well. That was right, like it was a good job. It was exactly what I wanted, but I couldn't make it work. So I started, once you're in UC Davis, and I had become a full employee by then, I just started looking around, and I actually, kind of story of my life, I took a step backwards. And I took a job as a program assistant in the fire department, but it was an 8 to 5. It was essentially a low demand job where I could prioritize my family but get the things I needed, which was health insurance and, a decent paying job. So it allowed me to do enough while my kids were babies. And eventually I was able to, when my life felt like I could do it, ask for more, start to look for more. But I was lucky enough to be able to be in a position that was able to sustain me while I couldn't do more.
Yeah. Your story is kind of inspirational. You political science to the temp pool to the program manager to program assistant, and then from jumping off from that point, were there moments early in your journey? So did you feel like you were outside of tech, or how did you get into tech?
Yeah, so it's funny because it was a slow creep into tech for me. I through my jobs, I really was focused in like budget or administrative work. And as part of that, I was involved in some software implementations. And originally, or in the beginning, I was the functional SME, or subject matter expert on the finance side. And I really enjoyed those processes. And it seemed like there was a period where I was involved in a lot of them. And so I got to know the people on the vendor side or the project management side, the tech side, and started interacting with them more and more. And I actually built a position that was, we titled it Administrative Systems Manager. I was in a department, and they had so many different pieces of software, and they needed somebody who was managing all the software, who was managing the updates and the different needs, the training, the different things involved. So that is really where I entered tech, so to speak, even though it wasn't in an IT group. And from that point, because of my collaborations with the IT group, then eventually I transitioned from being the customer to being the provider. And I actually joined the IT group supporting some of the software that I had been a customer of.
Interesting. That's a really interesting story. So there's a lot of data showing that women in tech are underrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
Have you felt like you've had to traverse barriers in tech at all?
To be honest, here at UC Davis, I don't feel like the barriers are abundant. We have a lot of examples of leadership and staff in IT that are female. So it's probably not as prevalent as it is in the outside, in tech startups or in corporate spaces. But, like I've said, I didn't have a desire to be in tech. It wasn't on my radar or my roadmap. I kind of fell into it. So it wasn't something that I thought I could get into. It wasn't somewhere that I even knew was a destination. I mean, I knew that tech, but you think of it in terms of developers or coders, that kind of thing. Tech is so big. There's so much, there's so many realms of tech. And those were a black hole to me. I didn't know anything about that.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I asked you on the show. And, to add to all the statistics I cited earlier, one recent statistic I read from 2025 is that 39% of women that join the tech field are actually haven't done that through a traditional pathway.
Right.
So you're in company with about 40% of the women who also did not, have their desire to study tech and then just fell into it. But how do you feel about it now that you work in tech and you manage huge projects?
Right. No, it's great. I love my job. I love what I do. I love the people that I work with. It is such a diverse group. I mean, one thing I will say, tech in the current era is diverse. Diverse people, backgrounds, all kinds of things, diverse generations. So you really are working with like everybody that you could possibly think of, anything, right? So that's great. The lanes of tech are so interesting and so diverse, right? There's everything from cybersecurity to building applications, to project management, to desktop support. There's so many different areas of tech. And there are opportunities for everybody, right? I think that's the thing. It can be a very welcoming environment. There are so many different opportunities in that space.
And you bring us to a good point, which is the mentorship in tech. So we've talked about underrepresentation of women in tech. We've also talked about, the fact that it's usually non-traditional, or not usually, but a large portion are non-traditional pathways. And now you mentor young or new folks that are coming into the tech world, and especially women that are not. And I focus on women right now. I know you mentor everybody, but our podcast is about women helping women, so that's why I ask about this. But especially women that are at the start of their careers. So the first thing I have to ask you is, thinking about not UC Davis necessarily, but the tech industry as a whole, what do you think needs to change in order for it to be more welcoming to women, so that women feel like I am a woman in tech because I work as a woman in tech, and not because I have a particular piece of paper that says I can work in tech?
Right. Here's my favorite fact. It's not a happy fact, but men often apply for jobs that they meet 50% of the criteria for. Women tend to only apply if they meet 90% of the criteria. What the heck? I mean, women, it's time for us to be as aspirational as men. I think that there is some inherent mental boundary where if we're not checking all the boxes, we think it's not for us. And that doesn't seem to exist with men, right? They're like, I can do that one thing, I can do it all.
Yeah.
And we can too. We just don't always put ourselves out there. So I think it is I think the young kids out there, I think there's a better pipeline. This certainly didn't really exist when I was young, this tech pipeline. But I do think that exposure to the young people of these opportunities, and they, they're, and again, we're at UC Davis, so we see a lot of representation of women. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I think you pretty much said it, which is, we got to believe in ourselves more. We have to have higher confidence, right?
Yeah.
And there's, the world wasn't made for us, right? We kind of have to kind of make our own way, and that's part of the reason for the podcast. We had to build a world that works for us, and that's what you did. Right. You built a position, and eventually that worked for you, and it became a bridge to what your career is today, which is incredible. So when you're mentoring young people or new people to in the office that it's coming in, what is it that you love about it? What are you? Why are you passionate about mentorship? What are you hoping to help young or new people see?
Right. I have benefited so much from mentors, and that is not it's not a technical position, right? A mentor. It's just somebody who takes the opportunity, takes the time to answer questions, to be a place for you to bounce ideas off of, and to be your cheerleader, right? Like that's all being a mentor is. And if you have, like, I've now been at UC Davis for 19 years. So I have a little bit of institutional knowledge, right? Sometimes that little bit of information is really helpful to people. The whys, the hows, the where, right? So I just try to be and to give people the information I wish that I would have had, or that somebody did give to me, and say, here's just this, here's something that will be helpful for you to know, right? But really my goal is to be a support, and to especially young professionals that, and women especially, that are dealing with they are professionals, they are the experts, and they are in meetings with people that may be much older than them, that may have more years of experience, but those people may not know more, those people may not have the information. And so really it's just being there to say, you got this, you are here, you are in your job because you can do your job, and a panel of people interviewed you and agreed that you could do this job. You were hired because you can do this job. So never doubt that you can do this job.
Did you have, that is really incredible advice. Did you have a mentor early on that helped you see your pathway?
Not early on. Midway, when I was starting to make my own path, I had a mentor, and she was not in tech. She had been at the university a long time, and she really helped. She was a supervisor and a mentor, right? She gave me feedback. Sometimes it was hard to hear feedback, which I think we all need as well. But it was important for me to hear it, and it has stayed with me, right? And so she gave me opportunities because I stood up and said, okay, here's what I want to do. How do I go about making it happen? And she said, let's try to figure it out together. And so that meant so much to me. And so, not that I want to guide people's careers, but I'm happy to be here as a sounding board, as a cheerleader for them as they make their own way through their careers.
I really love that experience. That's rare.
Yes.
in a career when you can have a mentor. I had one early on, and I've been looking for one. He's passed now, which is sad, but it's
Yeah.
been a while. But I've been looking for one for like 15 years.
Right.
So
Right.
looking, so we network, and we make our connections, and it's just really rare that you get that, because you're right. Being that mentor you could have given somebody a nugget of information that just opened up their world for them. It's so
Right.
important when they're making decisions about
Right.
their career paths.
Yeah.
All right. Now, early on, you probably made mistakes, right? That got, and
Yes.
you learned from them to get you where you're
Yes.
from. So what is one mistake that you made early on that that you learned from, that you would give advice to new people that are new in tech, or even
So,
that have been in tech for a while?
right. So I think that I did not ask enough questions when I was younger because I thought I had to know everything. And there's always the fear that you're going to be reprimanded in some way for not knowing. Um, and, that leads to not being able to get your job done appropriately, not having all the information, right? So now, and what I've learned is how to ask questions. So, sometimes it's the phrasing of it so that you don't look inept.
Mhm.
But even now, in my meetings and my projects, I may ask questions in a way now that is not for my benefit, but I may think others aren't understanding. And so I just ask the question, and I say things, tell it to me like this is my first day. Explain something to me. Tell me it in a different way so that I can better understand, because I can sometimes tell that other people are not getting it. So I'm willing to take the hit, if we call it a hit, so that everybody has the right understanding.
And that comes from confidence in your own abilities. You know that nobody's in that room is going to say
Right.
Kim doesn't know her stuff, and
Right.
so and
Right.
so that you make it safe for others.
In age, to be honest, right?
Mhm.
If I don't know something at this point, that's fine. I can live with that because I'm about learning, right? So
Mhm.
so it's an opportunity and not a disadvantage.
That's right. You're making it safe for others to learn, to ask
Yeah.
those questions and
Yeah.
be heard. All right, and you touched a little bit on had a traditional Gen X upbringing, and you probably work with different generations, maybe ones that are older than you, ones that are younger than you. For the new kind of workwork coming in, that Gen Z, and I don't know who's after them, Gen A, I don't know if
I
it's
don't
Gen
even know.
Y, after them, what advice can you give them that you've learned from being in the industry for a while, but also sort of taking your generational hits, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the thing that I keep coming back to is that, and again, this is about learning. The only thing you can take with you is knowledge. And some that knowledge is not always handed to you. Sometimes that knowledge is from stepping up and taking on an extra duty, learning a new system, learning a new task, learning a new function. It's not always the payment is not always right away.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're depositing that in your bank account for later, right? And I think what I see often is that people are like, oh, I'm not going to do an extra thing if it's not a promotion, if it's not, if I don't get paid for the extra work, I'm not doing it. And I appreciate that about the younger generations, but it's a double-edged sword because you're not going to be compensated yet for what you have to learn. You have to take that on. And I have been so rewarded in my career for nuggets of information that I gained by taking on an extra duty, taking on another thing. And 5 years down the line, somebody said, we need somebody who knows something about that. And I'm like, oh, I've done that. And it has paid for itself more than once to know things, right?
Mhm.
So there's that balance of standing up for yourself, having your boundaries, not taking on more than you're paid for. But there's also the chance that you're going to miss learning things that you need to know down the line. And you just never know what those things are.
Yeah, I've had such a similar experience as you. And I grew up in a generation, and my dad was extremely traditional. And so, although very
Right,
supportive. And
right,
so he always told me, you just try it. Just try it. Don't
yes,
worry, you can do it. It's going to suddenly come to you. And it always did. Like I was so scared to take jobs that were seemed too technical for me or
right,
too they seemed like, oh, that's something that I'm not good at. And then I tried and I'm like, no, I'm actually, there are things I'm not good at. But I
right,
discovered so many more things. And all these years later, as I've also journeyed through my career, I realized that I'm so much more well-rounded. I know a little bit about this. I know a lot about that. I know a little bit about this. And it just, I
yeah,
can be more agile that way. And you're finding
exactly.
it the same thing in your career.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I don't know what the future holds for the group of people that have those boundaries, but I know for me, it was such a boon to have all of those additional pieces. It
Mhm.
really served me well in my career.
That's great advice. Now, today you lead pretty big and complex projects. You have a family at home. You're single. You've got, so you're doing it
Right.
by yourself. How do you what are your strategies for simplifying when you've got all this work and you've got all these obligations? How do you
Mhm.
simplify your life?
Well, I lost a husband, so that helped. I don't
But
always recommend that to everybody.
it worked for you.
It
Okay.
did, it did. You know, again, it's age as well. I mean,
Mhm.
I look back, when my oldest was in kindergarten, he came home one day and he said, "You are the only mom that doesn't work in the classroom." It was the most heartbreaking day of my life. And
Mm.
even though intellectually I know about half the other moms, they're all working too. Like they're not there every day. They're not, right?
Mhm.
So I realized there was a need of his that maybe wasn't being met. Now I was in a job that I didn't have a lot of flexibility. I couldn't do a lot daytime, between 9 and 3 in the day, right? And I had a 3-year-old at home too that needed stuff. So how how could I meet all of those needs? And to my I would say to my detriment, I took on so much. By the time I was done, I was an officer on the PTA, and I ended up joining 2 other community boards. And then you have sports and all the classes and the things of little kids. It got to a point where I was so frazzled all the time. I was so over um obligated. I know it hurt my work life a little bit because you can't go 24/7 365 and have everything work, right?
Yeah.
So I chose to, and my health was impacted as well. And so while I did go through a divorce, I also made a really personal choice to really be more to choose activities, volunteer activities or whatever for work or personal that really were about my interest and my availability and not triggered by guilt that I wasn't doing.
Mm.
So that was a big life lesson for me. And social media, to be honest, does not help because you see everybody, oh, they're this board and they're doing this thing and they're over here and they're over here. And I was doing it all for a while. And I'm much happier. And I think my kids are happier when I'm not over obligated, right?
Wise words from Woman in Tech Kim Stevens reminding us that in order to avoid burnout, you gotta keep it simple. If you're enjoying the content on this channel, please like, subscribe, and share with others. This has been Bernadette Hill with Savage Simplicity reminding you that in order to simplify your life, sometimes you have to be savage.